Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got the real jam.
Today on Hear Them Out with Hannah Mears, I'm very excited to welcome a sportscaster and journalist of Bleacher Report and Turner Sports, Miss Taylor Rooks. Taylor, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here, and I think it's even funnier for people to know how this even came to be or how we even met in the first place. And I actually requested one day, Taylor Rooks went live on Instagram. I was like, sure, I'll hop on. I like to hear what she has to say sometimes. We'll see what she's talking about today. You're always full of opinions. And I don't know whether it's about the world or sports, there's always something you have to say. So I love hearing that. So I jumped on and I hit the request button. I was like, I've never done that before. We'll see how it works. And before I knew it, I was getting connected to be into Taylor's Instagram live, which was so funny. And I get on the screen and I have poison ivy all over like the left side of my face.
I cannot believe I'm like, oh my, but at first I really didn't even realize it until you said it. So it was not as bad as I'm sure you probably thought it was.
I was like mortified. I was like, oh my God, these people are going to be like, what is wrong with this girl? I had like pink cream covering it. But at that point I was like, whatever, like I'm here. This is who I am, you know, no makeup.
No, it was great. I'm happy you requested in and see, look what Instagram Live has done during this time.
Literally, look at social media during this time in general. But I'm really excited to have you here now. And I guess one thing I guess we could jump into right there is the importance of staying connected during this time and social media. So what was your motive in general about going live and requesting people to be in your Instagram live? What did you hope to get out of that?
Yeah, well, it's been so interesting to see the way people have used IG Live, because at this time, I think above all else, everybody is just kind of craving like connection. So I was bored. I'm like, I want to try going on IG Live. I'm not a person that usually goes on IG Live. So I tried it. And at first I was just talking, but then I kept on seeing people be like, add me, a request. So I'm like, okay, let's just meet and hang out with people, because, so much of my career, I do feel like I owe to those that just watched and support and retweet and like and share. So I know there'll never be a day where I'll get to talk to every single person, but I got the chance to talk to some on Instagram, and I had a great time. It brought me so much joy to just talk to other people and see their faces, because I haven't done that in so long, because I haven't left my apartment. But it was nice. And it was a spur of the moment thing that ended up making me feel really, really good.
Were you surprised at all by some of the things people had to ask you? Because the longer I sat on and watched when other people would come on, I know I asked a lot of advice you might have for younger people looking to get in the media and just talking about some of the things you've done. But some people were either asking like really off the wall questions or super specific sports questions. So were you surprised by anything at all?
No, I wasn't surprised by anything, but one question everybody loves, and I mean, I get it, but I don't know, everybody loves asking like, what was your favorite interview? But to me, I'm like, I don't know if that's that interesting of a question, for a couple reasons. Number one, it's like, what do you define by favorite? Like favorite because of the person I was interviewing, or favorite because what I got out of the interview? Because those are, two different people. But everybody loves asking that question. So now I'm like, maybe I need to find an answer, because it just hasn't crossed my mind to be like, this was my favorite. And in all honesty, whenever I'm done with the interview, I'm always like, that was my favorite. I feel like all of them are my favorite. So
that's how I feel too when I interview people. It's funny. I feel like that's everybody's favorite question to ask an interviewer, period. Like I've gotten asked that question so many times, like, is it Joe Jonas? Is it Saquon Barkley? Is it? And I'm like, well, wait, I don't know. I interviewed this kid who was 2 and it was adorable. And I felt like he was my favorite for a while. So
yeah, for sure.
I just feel like everyone always has something really interesting and unique. And I feel like every interview adds a new perspective to my life.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You get different things from different people. And so I hope one day I have this interview that is my definite answer to that. Like it was a favorite person and we had a great conversation, and then I'll have something to say. But it's definitely fun and cool to know that hasn't happened yet, because that is something to look forward to.
Right. And I think it's also important to point out that maybe since you can't pinpoint a favorite one, that you're on the right track to something. You've got something good going here.
Yeah, hopefully.
But it didn't just happen that you ended up being Taylor Rooks, and so many people know who you are, and you have a great brand going, and you're famous now, which is probably crazy
Now,
sometimes. Yes, yes, yes. But
whenever someone says that, I'm like, I feel like I'm known. You know, I don't know if I'm, but everyone's always like, I'm like, but I get it. I get it.
yes. You're famous in a lot of other people's eyes, but it's a compliment. I mean, you're like respected and famous, so you could be famous for something worse.
That's true, I guess. That's true.
But you've also had a lot of stepping stones in your journey to become the Taylor Rooks that you are today. And I never like to just, I guess, list off what people do, because I think it's so important to hear it from your own perspective of your journey. So in your eyes, what is your perspective of who Taylor Rooks is and how she got to be the Taylor Rooks she is now?
I mean, if you talk about it in terms of work, I think, and this is what I say to everyone, for whatever reason, people feel like saying you got lucky is a knock on your work, and it's not. I think that every single thing that has to do with any accomplishment, luck is involved in it in some form or fashion. So I think I owe a lot of this to the fact that I got lucky. And when those opportunities presented itself, because of my hard work, I was ready and I was prepared. In college, I worked tirelessly. All 4 years, I was working as a member of the media. So even though I graduated in 2014, I really have been a working journalist since 2011. And because of those things, you know, when I graduated college, the Big Ten Network just so happened to have a spot open, and I had graduated at the right time, and I was fortunate enough that I worked with them in school. So luck played a lot into that. So I think one of the reasons I'm able to do what I do now is because I got lucky and I've been fortunate. And I don't like this idea that I think people say that if something doesn't happen for you, it's because you're not working hard, because that's not the truth. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody's a hard worker. There's so many other elements that go into it that make you successful. So I recognize that it isn't just the work that I've done, but also those that have believed in me and the work that they have done for me. And I still think it's insane that the Big Ten Network hired a just turned 22-year-old to be on a live show 5 days a week, you know? So I think my success is a compilation of those people that believed and those people that hired me and me working and me believing in myself. So yeah, the journey is, I think it's been a lot of people's journey, and I just am trying to every day, you know, do the best that I can with the opportunities that have been afforded to me. But sometimes it's crazy to just think, you know, my dream has always been that I wanted to have my own show, and like now I have the show. So you're like, okay, well, what do you want to do next? But I mean, that's what makes life interesting, is always, you know, elevating and progressing.
And I think that's really cool that you pointed out that you were ready for the opportunity, though, because a lot of times being young and coming out of college, people are just saying, as long as you're working hard enough to get to the opportunity, but when that opportunity is presented, you're ready for it. Yeah. And so I think that's what's important to take away from what you were talking about as well, is that you may have been 22 on a live show, but everything you worked for up to that point prepared you for that moment.
Yeah, for sure. Because people think that being on TV is a lot easier than it is. You know, it isn't just like getting in front of the camera and talking. I mean, everyone thinks they can be on TV until they got to be on TV.
Right.
And you don't like luck your way into staying in the business. Like you maybe can luck your way into an opportunity in the business, but having that like longevity and staying and creating work that matters, that's a skill. You know, being on television is a skill. Talking to people is a skill. Interviewing is a skill. And, you know, it takes a lot of work to make it look easy. But because of that, people think it is easy. So you're right. I mean, you have to be prepared for those opportunities when they come. And I think that's important, that even with college, you know, I always say I didn't treat college like it was college. Like I treated college like it was a job. And I would encourage every person, regardless of what field you're trying to enter into, that you treat college in that way.
I love that. I just graduated, so I feel that. I feel like, oh, like now it's like, what's my next job? Because it's like that. And it's fun to treat it in that way, because I think it's important for everyone to take advantage of every resource their college has to offer. So yeah, it's good to hear your perspective in that. And thank goodness you took all those chances. And like you said, you were lucky, whether you're lucky or blessed, I like to call it in a lot of the terms too. You ended up now with your own show. which I know expressing your own opinion is something that's really important to you.
Mm-hmm.
So with Take It There with Taylor Rooks, for somebody who has never seen the show, how do you describe what you believe your show is to somebody?
Yeah, I would say I always call it like conversations with friends. Like, even though some of them I didn't even know before I interviewed them, I would like everyone watching it to think that they just dropped in on a conversation between two people speaking normally. I never wanted to feel like a stuffy interview where it's question, answer, question, answer. I just wanted to feel organic and real and raw. And most importantly, I wanted to get to the actual essence of that person. You know, I love when people watch the interview and then say, you know what, before this interview, I don't know if I liked them, but I like them now. Or I didn't know this about this person, but now I know this. Or, wow, they act totally different than I thought. And that to me is like what the goal of the show is, but doing that in a way that's honest. You know, even if you do walk away from the episode not liking a person, that's fine. You made an honest assessment based on what they gave you instead of what you have heard from media or Instagram or whatever. I just want people to learn about the athlete from the athlete. And that's what I try to accomplish with each episode.
I love that. That's been something with human-centered, I guess, sports journalism I've been trying a lot to do, because that's something I'm going to talk about with you later, is just like the humanistic part of celebrities and how people need to realize that everybody started somewhere. People have all had to do chores for their mom growing up or whomever. Like
Yeah.
everybody is a human in some sense. But that leads me to my next question about Take It There with Taylor Rooks. And that's sort of been how you've been pushing and challenging yourself to make each episode unique. Is it something where you have a direct plan of attack when you go into these to make them unique, or do people sometimes surprise you and how it ends up being from there? Like you just roll with it?
Yeah, you mean unique in terms of like where we do the interview, or what do you mean by that?
Where you do the interview, I guess, and maybe some of the little segments you want to incorporate, or if you're going to talk to somebody about a touchy subject or make one lighthearted, just each of them being individual to the person.
Yeah. So we always look, okay, like what does this person do organically? Like Chris Paul loves bowling. So we're like, well, then let's do this interview in a bowling alley. Our Tyler Hero has become very Miami, and we've seen pictures on it of him on boats and stuff. So we're like, let's try and do this interview on a boat. And so much of interviewing is about the environment. I think you can get better things out of people when they're in an environment that feels good to them or feels normal to them or natural to them. So that's one of the reasons I never wanted to do the show in a studio. Because when you come into a studio, you come into a studio preparing to be interviewed, preparing to ask questions, preparing to like answer these questions in a way that is an interview answer. Like there's something very subconscious about answering a question when a mic is in front of you, because you're just prepared to give like a media answer. But these environments allow them to give an answer that they would give normally. So we try to do it like that, making it unique to the person. And then if like, I'm trying to think of a segment like true or false and why. We use that as a device that is maybe like a trickier question, but we're forcing you to give an answer. It just makes people give more straightforward answers. And we use things about like you posted on this day, because social media is such a good tool for research.
Yeah.
And one of the things about social media is, you know, that you can post something and not really have to explain it past that post, because it's just a post that's going out. So a lot of time when you ask somebody why you posted this, you get a much better and much deeper story. So we don't ask every athlete the same segments, because you try to fit it to something that works for them.
Right.
Every episode, you're right, is treated completely differently from the next episode or the one before it.
Have you surprised yourself at all in the way that the show has been going, or the way you've adapted and handled yourself in these interviews as well? Because I mean, when the spotlight's on you and you're talking to some of like the nation's top athletes, I know that can be intimidating, and wanting to get maybe the perfect interview or asking the exact question you feel everyone wants to know. So have you surprised yourself in the way that you've challenged yourself or handled these situations?
I think I more so have been surprised. So in season 1, and this is like, it's a very subtle change. I don't really know if people realize this, but in season 1, we focused a lot of the episodes on the interview, and then the activity was almost secondary. Like the sit down was the main part, and then the activity would be the thing we did after. But this season, the activity has kind of become the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little nervous that you wouldn't be able to get people to open up and speak at length and in depth when they're distracted by everything around them. Like, you know, what am I going to be able to get Tyler here to really talk when we're on a boat? Or Chris Paul to talk when we're in a bowling alley? Whereas last year, like Jimmy Butler, we were in his home. We were sitting down in his home. Rudy Gobert, we're in his home. We're at a place he's always at, and it's a more encouraging place to speak. But I have been surprised to see that it doesn't really matter where you are or what you're doing as long as you're asking good questions.
Right.
So I have definitely put that in my pocket, and I want that to extend to everything that I do, knowing that you don't have to be a product of the environment. The environment can really become a product of you, and trying to incorporate that into everything that I do from here on out.
No, I love that. And I especially like the way that you're handling the misconceptions people have about athletes, and you're giving them the platform to describe themselves and explain themselves and what they're saying. Because as much as it hurts a lot of the time in the world of celebrities and famous athletes and people in the spotlight, everyone wants to assume that they're perfect and that their hero, there's no way their hero does this or, you know, does that. They want them to stay consistent in how they view them, and they don't want to take a step back and realize that everybody's human.
Yeah.
And I think we've all gotten a huge wake-up call with that, with the MJ documentary that's been out recently. And we have seen Michael Jordan in a very transparent way, which I think is so important in today's world with social media and the way people can skew things a lot of the times. Yeah. And that's what I loved, I think, about the documentary, is how transparent and real it is. And it really makes you have to think about everybody being human. Mm-hmm. So you recently have been very open on Twitter, and I call it my creep search because when I do all my research, I feel like all I do is creep on people now.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
Right? So just scrolling. I'm like, if I accidentally like something, people are going to be like, this is creepy. Yeah. But you've been so vocal about the documentary, which I think it's awesome. So first off, like, what's been your overall opinion about the documentary before we make you explain some of your tweets?
No, I think the documentary has been great. If anything, it's just been feel good. I think people look forward to Sundays. We're all watching the same thing. We're all talking about the same thing. And it just gives us some sense of happiness throughout this void of sports. I like how non-linear the storytelling is. I think it's confusing at some points, but I think it's also the most effective way to tell the story of MJ, because you're seeing the cause and effect in real time. Like, they'll talk about something and then we'll see how that affected what happened years later and vice versa. So, and when you think about it in real life, that's how we tell stories. We tell stories like what happened and then what happened as the result of. So it's been nice, but it's really cool to see the different opinions from different people on MJ. The one thing I do wish we had more of is the female perspective of MJ. I know we have some female journalists in there, but I mean the women that are closest to him.
Right.
Because I feel like that's missing just a bit, and maybe we'll see that in the next episodes. I don't know, but just to get the full scope of a person, you want to see them as a dad, as a husband, as an athlete. Like, I think all of those things are very important, and that's missing a little bit, but it's still a documentary that gets 10 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so. A really unique thing about it was like the iPad reactions at times too. Yeah. I think it's so cool that they'll like introduce this big conflict in this big moment and then just watch him laughing at it. Like, that's not even close to how I felt. It's just a really fun way to incorporate him into the storytelling itself. Where it's like, we're not just sitting down and writing this word for word. Like, here's how he actually felt at that time, or reflects back on now. And I think like the casual way that's done just, you know, humanizes him further in this.
Yeah, for sure. It's great. They did a very good job at capturing his essence, which is really hard to do. And which is also really hard to do when you have had to sit with somebody for so long. I mean, he's probably sitting for hours and hours, but for everything to feel like authentic and real is a testament to that production and, you know, direction.
Right. And especially when you have somebody of his caliber where everyone already has their own opinion about who they believe he is. Like, he's already set in stone in a lot of people's heads that he's the MJ, the basketball player. He's this, he's that. So to have to kind of mold people's perspective in a new way is extremely challenging.
Totally.
And something that you said in a tweet here, which I really admired you speaking out about this, but I would love to hear you talk about it further because like we said, you can only fit so much explanation in the characters you can tweet about.
Yeah.
That in reality, this bad guy persona Michael Jordan had is frowned upon by many people. This idea that the greats also need to be good doesn't always have to be true. Embracing the fact people are many different things in order to be who they need to be, who they're supposed to be. So I just want to give you the chance to go ahead and elaborate on that and the bad guy persona that he has reflected in this documentary.
Yeah. I think in general, humans want to put people into boxes. And I think that's because if you put somebody into a box, you can make a judgment about them without having to really get to know them. So when we see these athletes, we want to say, okay, good and bad. And you inherently think that the good athlete is like worth more or better than the one that is viewed as the bad athlete. Mm-hmm. I think that's one thing that at the time Jordan probably had on his side was that you didn't see enough of him to make a decision about whether he was good or bad. So you went to the default, which was like, okay, he's good. But then as time, progressed and you learn more things about him, like the documentary, you're like, okay, maybe he did have some flaws that we didn't know at that time. But I think the challenge is not letting those flaws change the things that you already thought about Michael Jordan. Because the good things about you make you who you are just as much as the bad things about you make you who you are. And it's impossible to praise one without praising the other. And so sometimes these characteristics that are viewed as bad are also incredibly necessary.
Right.
And you can't be the competitor at the level that he was or the greatness at the level that he was at without having some things about you that everybody isn't going to agree with. I just think that's impossible in general. And that doesn't just apply to athletes. That applies to any powerful person on earth. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just unrealistic. So I would hope that just in general, we appreciate people for the many things that they are and not just the ones that we admire about them.
And I think so often we demand perfection, and that's just not fair. Like, nobody, he's already expected to be perfect every second on the court, and he was dang well near perfect all the time. So that pressure on somebody, like, we forget how heavy that weighs. And but for him though, I guess he's always pushing his teammates to be perfect. And a lot of them either responded to that positively now that they look back on it, but that can be hard sometimes. So do you think he was maybe held to a different standard, not just because he was MJ, but because he demanded perfection of others as well?
Yeah, I mean, and I think even more than that is human beings, like people that do not have jobs that are in the spotlight, right, are already not perfect at all. And I'd argue that it's harder to be perfect when you're a famous person than it is when you're a non-famous person. But for whatever reason, we think that famous people, it's like they're supposed to be perfect. When really it's 10 times more difficult. There's just more things you're exposed to. There's more pressures. There's more spotlight. There's more everything. So I think that for MJ, at the end of the day, you want to know, for whatever reason, humans are like this. They just want to know the one thing that like isn't great about people. Mm-hmm. So in a weird way, I think some people are liking to see this because they're like, okay, like he was more than this or that. And I think one of the things, like when the media was talking about his gambling and his dad and that just like terrible correlation that they made, it's because they're like, is this the chink in the armor? Like, we finally found it. And I hate this idea that we have about people that like, we want to find one bad thing. Mm-hmm. Like going out of our way to find a bad thing is something that has happened, and not even just in media, but in life, that I don't really like. So the documentary is doing a good job of showing every aspect of him from different points of view in a way that's digestible and understandable.
Yeah, and I hated that part too, where it was like somebody's already handling something in their life that is crushing. Like, that is a horrible thing for any human to go through. So now we're going to go ahead and play the blame game on that person already struggling. Yeah. Like, it's just mind-blowing to me. But you also applauded Michael Jordan in this documentary and one of your tweets. And I think you as a person have been really active about your opinions on social media about everything that there is. And I think I respect you on another level for that, because that's hard to do and be judged for, is being somebody who wants to be very transparent with their platform. And so your tweet about, I applaud Michael Jordan for having that conversation. I think that was the first time he's addressed the Republican comment publicly. I don't think it's fair to expect every Black person to be a political figure, even if it's what we would do, or if we disagree. Mm-hmm. So what was were you afraid to tweet something like that? Were you were excited to tweet something like that to get a response back? Like, how important was it for you to address that moment in particular?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't scare. I definitely don't scare easily, but I think more importantly is like, Twitter for me is for the like discourse of opinions. So you can agree or disagree with somebody, and I'm fine with somebody tweeting me back and saying they disagree. Like, that's great. I would like to hear your opinion on it. And I think what happens with Twitter is people disagree in a way that's inappropriate. But no, I was fine tweeting that out. I think honestly that's probably the conversation that they wanted to be had when they got into the documentary. And I do stand by that. I think it is unfair to ask every Black person to be the spokesperson for all Black people. Mm-hmm. That is not how I live. I think that if you are a Black person and you have a platform, it's very important to take on that responsibility for those who maybe do not have that platform. Mm-hmm. But I'm also not in the business of inputting my lifestyle onto people that are not me. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's fair to say Michael Jordan was bad for not speaking up for Black people, when my only reason for feeling that way is because it's what I would do. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, there's probably some people that we shouldn't want to speak. I think there's been people who have spoken about issues from a place of inexperience or not really knowing what they're talking about. And sometimes that can hurt more than it can help. But I adamantly say this and completely will say it forever, that Black athletes, in my opinion, should speak up for Black people. And Black public figures in general should. But I don't think that means you're a bad person.
Right.
If you don't. It just means you're a person who didn't want that to be your cause.
And I do think it's also important for people to realize that there are shy people in this world. There are people that are really comfortable speaking out about things. There are people who are not knowledgeable about certain topics, despite whether we want them to be. And we can't forget that everybody, just because they're famous or have a platform, is really comfortable being in the public eye and talking. Like, sometimes by accident they're famous or good at what they do, but that doesn't make them great in front of a camera or great with how they say things. Mm-hmm. Because the last thing you want is for somebody that you believe should use their platform and then speak out and it not sound great, or it makes them look bad. So I think it's really important that you stress, how you feel about it, what you would like to see, but that there is certain cases where people probably should step back and not speak upon things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And okay, so my last tweet I want you to explain, and a little more lighthearted, still goes along with the documentary, but explain your outfit, Taylor.
Oh my gosh, when I found that photo, I'm like, girl, what were you doing? So I love like vintage sports clothes. Like I have a whole bunch of vintage sports clothes.
I love that. I want to see that collection sometimes.
I have some cute stuff, a lot of starter jackets and stuff, but I was either like 18 or 19 in that photo. And I was just wearing my Bulls stuff. When I went to University of Illinois, I just everyone's talking about the Bulls. Bulls were cool. So I wanted to wear Bulls outfits.
Right.
But when I found that, I'm like, girl, what was this? It's my hair looks a mess. Why would I wear this big oversized jacket? And there was this thrift store in Champaign, and he sold a lot of those type of clothes. So if I wanted some, I'd buy it, and he would take a photo, and he would use it for his site or whatever. So that was one of those.
One of those moments, right?
Yeah.
I love it though. I think it's fun, and I think it really explains you as a person, because I have seen some of the stuff you tweeted out about collectibles and whatnot. So I think that's cool. But I think it's also fun when people share that side of them, who they're like, what the heck was I doing? We all went through awkward, weird phases where we might have made that outfit look a little different now. But overall, this conversation, I think I've got to get a really good feel about who you are as a person, the opinions that you have, what you feel is important, things you've been doing over this time and connecting with your fans. But if you had to leave today and you just want everybody to know who you are as a person, just like you do with these athletes who are in the spotlights, what would you tell people? Who do you want people to know Taylor Rooks is?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm a person who enjoys learning. And one of my favorite things I like learning about is people.
Mm-hmm.
And I like talking to people, whether you are a famous person, whether you're an athlete, whether you're someone on the street, whether you're someone I met at the mall. Like, I just like learning. And I do really believe there's something you can take from everybody, whether it's good or bad. And really that the way that you see me on social media and in the show is how I actually act. So in a lot of ways, I feel like people kind of have gotten a good scope of me. This, if you follow me, but I would say, yeah, I'm a person who likes people. I'm a person who has an irrational belief in myself. And I hope that every single person knows that they can do whatever it is they want to do. And we're all limitless. And we just have to believe that. And I try to live my life like that every single day.
I love that. And I love that your social media, by your tweets and by what you're saying, really does reflect who you are as a person. So thank you for being transparent with the world as you're asking everyone else to be as well. I think that's so important. But most importantly, thank you so much for being here with me today. And I'm
happy that Instagram Live brought us together.
Me too, right? What a love story right there. Instagram Live brought us together. The modern day networking, but my makeshift studio here. Thank you for dropping in.
I love it. And good luck with this content you're creating. I think that you are incredibly talented and you're good in front of the camera. And I always say there's some things like you just can't teach. And I generally don't think you can really teach being good in front of the camera. So you just naturally have that. So I'm looking forward to seeing everything that you do in your career, and congrats on graduating.
Thank you so much. It means a lot, the compliments as well. I have a lot to learn, but I'm glad now that I have people like you to help guide me along the way. And everyone, please go and check out all of Taylor's stuff. Take It There with Taylor Rooks. Follow her on Instagram, especially if you're a fan of this Michael Jordan doc. She will make your mind spin and ask a billion questions. So I encourage all of you to go follow her social media channels as well. This has been Hear Them Out with Hannah Mears.